So everybody, thanks so much for listening. If you are listening under this video, I should say in the video, in the picture, please click the subscribe button. Please, please, please. YouTube is suppressing these videos and these interviews. So please click the button so we can get this interview and the other interviews out to as many people as possible. Greatly appreciate that. We have a man that needs no introduction, but we will give him one. This is Mohawk Joey. He has his own podcast on YouTube. So definitely check it out. It's Mohawk Joey on YouTube. And he's going to be talking about a story in Florida that he went through. And I think it's really impressive. So let's introduce Joey. So, Joey, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate your time tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Rob.
So let's talk. Well, before we even go into the story, can you tell the viewers a little bit about you in general?
All right. I mean, I did end up with a Florida Man headline. I'm a Florida man. I grew up in the Keys, kind of Key West, Miami, Fort Myers. I've always been in South Florida, but I am well traveled. I've sailed the Caribbean on a tall ship up and down the East Coast, done some relief missions after hurricanes to places that couldn't get supplies in traditional ways, but we can get the schooner in there with 20 tons of cargo. So we do stuff like that. And then during the pandemic, sailing charters dried up, obviously, because all tourism activity was put to an end. And down in Key West, it was doubly so. They actually closed down the road. And then, started participating in the gig economy since then after the unemployment dried up. And then my employment experiment happened.
Yeah, so talk about that employment experience.
All right. Well, and every time I tell the story, I have to remind people it just started out of a conversation that I had and a complete spite-filled desire to prove this guy wrong. I went to the plasma clinic here in Fort Myers. Part of the gigs I was picking up was the plasma clinic down here was paying a few extra bucks if you had the COVID antibodies there for a while. So, $200 a week to donate. It's pretty cool. I was trying out a different clinic. They had a new member program. It took me 3 weeks to get a appointment there. I can't get them on the phone, so I just decided to show up. And they're like, no, you have to have the appointment. I'm like, well, listen, I talked to the manager, and the manager goes off on this rant about how nobody wants to work and how everybody's quitting their jobs over these stimulus checks. Now, this is in August of 2021, and the unemployment benefits in Florida have now been dropped to $275 a week at this point, right? Because the extra benefits ended in June. Also, at this point, it has been 6 months since the last stimulus check, unless you are a parent, right? And you're getting the earned income credit ahead of time.
Yeah.
So at the time, there all these stimulus checks and extra money he was talking about. I was like, man, like if you're losing medical staff over a $1,200 check that happened a year ago and you still can't find help, that might not be a money problem. You know what I mean? And he just goes off on this rant. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go back to the plasma clinic I already do business with that treats me with respect. So bye. Right. And I just went back to the one I always go to. No big deal. But that conversation bothered me. And I got home and then I'm seeing all the stuff because I've been applying for jobs. I'm on unemployment. I have to apply for jobs, and I'm applying for their bare minimum and another 20 or 30 a week anyways, because if I see it and it looks like something I would do for money, then I fucking click on it and I send it, because it's not that hard to apply online, right? It's a couple of buttons and then 10, 20 minutes per company, you're good to go. Some of them it's easy. You just send a resume, whatever. So I've been doing this for a while and I'm seeing the same thing. Nobody wants to work, but I'm not getting any responses to like these piles of resumes I'm throwing out. So thinking about this, and I'm looking at all these groups around town where everyone's saying no one wants to work, and I'm seeing all these signs that they're hiring $16 an hour at McDonald's, and I'm like, these three things that I'm experiencing at the same time, they're not adding up, right? And this isn't the first time I've experienced all these things, but usually when I talk about my frustration with these things, it falls on deaf ears. All of my friends that have jobs are like, whatever, try harder, just blah, blah, blah. And then, but the climate has changed. So I decided, I'm like, well, I'll just pick two places every day that are online talking about like, no one wants to work, or where someone is talking about, well, the place I work is hiring. But they're also the type of person that's being a complete asshole online, right? So I'm like, well, let's see if there's some correlation here between these things. So I send out two of these a day, 30 days in a row. And like the last day of it, the results that I'd gotten out of 28 at that time, I'd gotten like 57 responses, or 50. I had done 57 of the applications so far. I had at that point gotten 16 emails, and out of those 16 emails, 4 of them turned into phone calls, and out of those 4 phone calls, 1 of them turned into actually talking to a person, right? Like actually meeting with a person on the phone, because that's how we do it in the COVID times, right? And this guy, same thing. It's an ad for a construction helper. This guy, it says $10 an hour in the ad, 40 hours a week. On the phone, he's like, well, you'll start at $8.65 an hour, which at the time was, or $8.56, I believe, Florida's minimum wage at the time. And it was going to go up to $10 an hour starting October 1st. So you get the raise to $10 an hour on October 1st, he says. And you start at, you need to be available Monday through Friday, 40 hours, but you're only going to be working 2 or 3 days a week until you've proven yourself the first 6 months. I'm like, so you want to pay $12 an hour is what you said, 10 to 12, but you're really saying 8.65 to 10. And what you said was 40 hours is 20 to start, but I got to be available all 40. I'm like, that doesn't, so I didn't take that job, obviously. And this post where I posted this frustration, I went on and I was like, sounds like you guys aren't desperate for employees. You just miss your slaves, right? You miss this cheap, easy labor pool that you could just be McDonald's and have a 130% turnover rate and be okay. There's someone to replace you next, right? Like that's how they all operated. But during the pandemic, a lot of people, while forced into a situation where they had to change their lifestyle, which is the biggest thing people are afraid of. Everyone who was finally forced to make that change and get out of that for that minute, and the people who that $1,200 did affect their life in a big way, and the $1,400 did affect their life in a big way, because now all of a sudden between that and the unemployment for the next 6 months, all of your bills were on auto pay on time, and everything just happened like it happened, and you weren't, and for a lot of people, this was the first time in their life they've ever experienced any kind of peace of mind like that, right?
Yeah.
First time I've ever been on unemployment, right? That was
right. Same here.
The most free government money I've ever gotten, but it wasn't free. I had to work for that shit. You mentioned you had a problem yourself with your unemployment system. Yeah. And that's Florida's unemployment system is a whole nother episode. But
I agree. I'll tell you what. I was on the phone one time with Florida unemployment for 3 hours and 45 minutes. I saw people that sent pictures on Facebook groups. They were on the phone with them for 9-10 hours. It's really insane. And there was some great representatives that were Democrats in the state legislature. A friend of mine, Anna Escamani in Orlando, and she was pushing for a special session for that unemployment issue. The governor would not do that. The governor also did not do anything for unemployment or housing in general, which is out of this world right now in the legislative session that just ended on March 18th. It's really, Florida's in some deep trouble, and it's going to get worse. The rich are going to get richer, and the poor are really going to get worse hit. Yeah. And there's going to be more people that are going to get worse hit, because the people that were in the middle class are just going to drop right down like a rock into the poor category.
Right. But that's also where the strength of numbers for the working class is coming in, though. A lot of people who have been under the illusion that they are closer to, those guys than us guys over here, right? Like a lot of the middle class is under the illusion that like they're all just a really good couple weeks away from being the next Musk or Bezos. And the reality is that none of us are that weren't born into the things they were born into and have incredible luck, because not even all the people that had the advantages that they have or disadvantages they have achieved the things they've achieved. And there's an extreme amount of luck, broken policy, slave labor, and everything else in between, right? Like there's a lot of reasons that shit is not kosher. And when it comes to the way that the unemployment system in Florida worked, the way that all of the employers were out there saying we can't find workers, right? And they were all being really loud about it. But a deeper dig, like I did, all of a sudden what started happening was everyone who was applying at this level to these places and Indeed and everything, everyone was experiencing the same experience or worse. You know, I did my 60 with, you know, one interview out of 60. Some of the people who participated in part 2 of the experiment, where I had the people who were joining in as fans submit their job search data, you know, and reasons that they overlook job listings and why they would pass right by one, and, you know, difficult language. And then it says, I don't want to work at this place. So I got 85, 87 people submitted all this info. Some of these people went through 150 to 200 places before they finally got hired at a job over a 5 or 6 month period, you know, and so all of a sudden, these numbers that like people were telling me sounded so outrageous, because 20 years ago when they got their job, they went and put in an application at 5 places, and one of them called them because they handed a piece of paper to a manager and he said, yeah, we'll call you tomorrow. And the guy called him tomorrow. That's not how looking for jobs works anymore. If you walk into a place and ask for an application, they're like, yeah, you can go to the website. Are you hiring? I don't know. That's it. You know, that's all you get. That's the feedback.
So, you know, we see on the news and we see all around town in the state of Florida, but even, you know, cities and towns all over the country, they have those help wanted signs, or as you said, even with McDonald's, up to 16, up to $15 an hour. And like you said, it's increasingly hard to get even a call back or of any of these jobs that you applied for.
Well, and they all have the asterisks, you know, they wrote that little asterisk, $16 an hour for people willing to work 3rd shift 7 days a week for this. Otherwise, you get 12, right? Like,
right. So when we see all these help wanted signs all around the country and all these business owners are complaining, we can't find the workers, we can't get anybody to apply and all this stuff. People don't want to work, just like you said, the guy at the plasma place was telling you. What answer would you give to them?
The problem isn't a labor shortage, it's wage shortage. See, because this is only happening under a certain number. All of the people I know who are hiring for trades that pay living wages, places that provide healthcare and childcare and housing, none of my friends that are working in those fields or running those businesses are having any staffing problems. You know what I mean? Across the country, people are full up on staff anywhere where they are providing a living wage to their employees. So the vocal minority is the places that exploit the class of labor that they like to label the high school kids. But the average McDonald's employee is 29 years old. You know, the average age of a Walmart employee is in their 30s, actually. Like, McDonald's is open 24/7.
Amazon too.
Amazon too. Like, in Amazon, nobody from high school is working at Amazon, right? That's an 18 or 21 and up job. And I think you're 18 to get in the call center, and then 21 if you're going to be in a factory or and now don't quote me on this. I've never worked for Amazon. I've also never worked for a union. I've never really worked at a place with an option for health insurance. So I have always worked in the level of labor where the benefits that I now want to ask for people stuck in that are at, like, I'm cool with where I'm at in my life. I've learned how to survive on so little. Like, I can do me. Like, I have a nice little thing going with my Mario Kart game setup that I'm going to start doing. And I do web design, and you know, I do all of this activism stuff on the side. It all came from that experiment. Before that day when I made that post about that spite thing, like, I was just a dude that said this doesn't feel right, and I was mad. It was the, you know, the 16,000 respondents to that post, and then I was in the No One Wants to Work group, and we only had like 9,000 people in there at the time that it started. And I think at this point that group's almost up to 20,000. I was a member of that for a long time. The anti-work Reddit that I first trended on, I didn't know there was a Reddit that said anti-work. I didn't know Reddit had a front page, right? My friend sends me the screenshot like, yo, you're on the front page of Reddit. I'm like, what is this, an old-timey newsstand? Like, where'd that come from? And then I looked at, and so I joined these places, and I found, and this is where I found that all of a sudden, like, for the first time in my life, when I had these feelings about the labor pool, like, everyone else was going through the same exact thing. Like, every single person at Reddit was like, yeah, fuck yeah, me too, man. Like, it's been like that for years. I'm like, fucking, I know, right? And then that was over and over that. And so having that happen after, you know, having all these negative experiences, and then seeing in the news employers are starting to talk about, oh, we're being ghosted by employees. And then Business Insider calls, and I'm like, wait. So I'm like reading Business Insider articles, and I'd sent Dominic an email like, oh, hey, I read your article, and this was going on over here. And he's like, yeah, let's do the story. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like, so then I'm like, all of a sudden, okay, talk to them. And up until that point on the internet, Mohawk Joey Wright, like my real name hadn't even come out with all this stuff. It was weird because like I didn't want to be, I didn't ask for any of it, right? And then,
Right.
but then I had to make this choice right there. I had to be like, okay, so if I'm going public with everything, then that means he's gonna have to publish my real name, and that means that all these other things, and that means all of a sudden this, Mohawk Joey, the character that I am, that posts crazy shit on the internet, which is different from my public facing persona of Joseph Holtz, who is the person who applies for jobs and is normal and has to do, because I've always kept those two things separate on Facebook.
Sure.
Because when people during the experiment were like, oh, well, yeah, who would hire a guy with this? I'm like, you really think that I put the same email address that has a big giant picture that says IE ass on it on the job applications I put in? Like, no, you're right. But even if I was, it's McDonald's. Okay, guy, like, who cares? Like, have you seen what the people who work at McDonald's post? They ain't worried about that, allegedly. And then I'm looking at all this, and this is what's happening everywhere. I'm like, you guys, it's just not like that. But I had to make that choice right then. I had to be like, so then I put it all out there. Now I'm Joey Holtz, and then things start coming out. My criminal record when I'm a kid, because oh yeah, I wouldn't hire a guy that got arrested for marijuana 20 years ago, or the big scoop on me in Gulf Shore Insider. And they're like, and I'm like, you guys, if a job is using my 20-year-old pot charge against me to decide that I'm not gonna be good for working for them today. Also, what the fuck kind of job are they doing in there? Like, the responses to everything were outrageous, but the supportive ones were so much more. Every outrageous response was surrounded by 100 other people that were going through the same thing. And that's Business Insider thing went big, and then the CBS Evening News, Norah O'Donnell. So I ended up on a bunch of large outlets, and I think a couple of these guys read the initial report and thought that they were about to do a story about one whole thing. Like, you remember we were saying earlier, you don't know who you're about to talk to, right? So these guys read the headline and thought they were just going to come on and make fun of some poor guy that can't get a job in Florida, haha, look at Florida, man. And did not expect me to respond in the ways I did. Like, I'm like, bro, no, I'm happily employed. Oh, well, what would your boss think about you looking for all these jobs? My boss is fully aware about the experiment I conducted. We talk about it often. You know what I mean? Like, it. Yeah. Did you read the teleprompter first, guy? Like, or even he read the teleprompter. He never once actually, looked at the story he was about to be talking about. It was great. That was like I think that was the Donlin report.
No, I gotta check those out, by the way. But anyways, are they all on YouTube?
I posted links to some of them on the YouTube. Funny enough, everything about me that was on the NBC network disappeared one day, except for my appearance on Mornings with Savannah, which is still available to see on Mornings with Savannah's Twitter feed only.
Wow,
it's just the weird thing.
Really some articles,
weird. Some articles about me were on sites and then gone. There was a poorly translated article written in the World News Report, which is a Chinese publication. So there's an article about me written in Chinese out there. I made a cool shirt out of a poor translation from that. It's been crazy, but now after 6 months, right now, let's look at where we're sitting right now with when all this happened. The Great Resignation hadn't happened yet, right? The CNN special hadn't happened. Everyone was saying that what I said was impossible and it was bullshit, and there's got to be something else going on, right? But then now, not only is this going on, but now inflation has gone on the rise because nobody can afford things, and then gas goes up, and then these are all responses of an economy controlled by greedy fucks, playing chess with people's lives. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, all these, whatever it is, oil sanctions or food costs, are like, we have enough houses and enough food in America to feed every person in America and give them a house. We could give them some of them two. Right now, some of them own 7. So, That's when
Right.
you start getting the balance thing. But like we have the space and the resources to do it. But then, well, who's going to pay for it? Well, who the fuck paid for planting the trees in the first place? You know what I mean, guys? Like the food and the space existed before the money. So we made
Yeah.
up the problem. We can make up the solution.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%. I want to ask you this because I know this is what the people that are against you in the experiment will say. They want to say, well, did you apply for jobs that you were overqualified for or that you were underqualified for? And they're saying that's probably why you didn't get hired for some of these jobs.
Yeah, I heard a lot of that. And then
Okay.
I used to do recruiting, right? And
Okay.
having looked for and got a lot of jobs and having learned how to write a resume, my most important thing about writing a resume is write a new resume for each job you're applying for each time. In a sense, where I don't just hand out a pile of resumes like I used to do as a kid, right? In the day of emails, I can make sure that I have my curriculum vitae, right? My list of every job. And then a resume is supposed to only be 1 or 2 pages. So you
Yeah.
take the places you've worked that are most relevant to the job you're applying for, you highlight the relevant skills, and you look for the keywords, right? Because the keywords are the most important part. So as long as you're matching your resume to the keywords, skills, and qualifications in the thing, you're matching everything on the algorithms, right? You're matching all that. And people pick up your resume or open it up, and their eyeballs look at it for about 10 seconds, and then they either stop and read it or they move on. So it doesn't matter what the content is. And a couple of people have done some experiments about that and their contents of their resume on Indeed, and how when they added keywords but made completely bullshit things with the keywords in them, their interview rate went up by like 400%. I'll have to look up
Wow.
who did that one. I thought that was pretty cool. But so I've, my
Mm.
learning disabilities, my special gifts, whatever you want to call them, have I notice patterns in things often. So this is a pattern that I've always noticed when I'm applying for jobs. I found if I treat each resume, even when they don't ask for a cover letter, if I treat it as if it is also kind of the cover letter in there, because unless they're asking for the chronological timeline, then that is you presenting the best you for that job. So it doesn't necessarily mean everything you've ever done. And that's a mistake a lot of people make when they're applying for places, because then you can look overqualified. But, I leave out that I've been a GM before to a place. If I'm applying to be a server, my GM qualifications have no relevance to the server position. So I don't put that job in there. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So I did tailor each resume specifically, as I always do.
You tailored all 60 of those resumes?
It's a matter of copying and pasting for 30 seconds. You know what I mean? You have your master list, and then you look at the job description and
Okay,
say what
fair.
stuff fits. Yeah, I'm not like that's why I said not writing a new one each time. I have my list of everything, and then you just, okay, what's relevant to this job listing, and you swap out a couple entries. Is it the
Yeah,
pizza restaurants or is it the Italian joints?
yeah.
Am I going for to go or am I going for in house? Because
So what was some of the, sorry to interrupt you, Joey. What were some of the jobs that you applied for? Like
almost
industries, if you want to say, or
almost all of it was in food and beverage. Like it was almost all
oh,
restaurants. There were several construction things and 1 or 2 what's it called, like data entry positions. Uh,
mhm.
but for the most part, it was all restaurants. Like that was the biggest part of where people were online talking shit about they can't find help. But then every news report is people, throwing soup in people's faces and punching McDonald's waitresses in the mouth. And like, I wouldn't want my kid to work in fast food right now, the way people are acting out there. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's bad.
Is this like the chain restaurants or just like the mom and pop restaurants?
uh, there's a mixture of both. And that's part of
Sure.
why it was very important to me. Like, there were many calls for me to release the names of all the places afterwards and all this stuff, but I didn't want to have any one person or place become a target or an excuse for a reason for it to, because then some place can be like, oh, well, we had some asshole looking through the resumes, then they can fire that guy and feel like, they
Yeah.
defeated no. The places that I applied know who and what they were because they've seen my name and it's in there. And you know what I mean? It wasn't going to behoove anyone to do that. And that also is the backbone of why I feel the way I do about all of it. Like I said, I was a very private person in the beginning. If I
Sure.
go and I destroy some mom and pop restaurant accidentally because of some stuff that happened because I went viral on the internet, I would never forgive myself, because
Yeah.
my entire intention for this thing was, education and empathy. Like, it started in spite, but once it got to the point where I was deciding to talk to the world as me through these places where I'm being given a voice to. Business Insider, according to Mr. Router, our article was the top article for 3 days in a row. He said usually, things are up there for an hour or two. He said it was insane. I don't want any part of what I've done to be like, I don't blame employers for feeling the way that they feel, small business owners trapped within the confines of the same system that we are. Like, we're out here
Yeah, but
bailing,
I think,
but
sorry to
we're
interrupt.
bailing, but we're
I
bailing
think
out these
there's a
corporations,
difference.
right? We're bailing out these
Yeah.
corporations and shit. We're bailing out the banks when the people that actually, kind of need the bailouts are the small
Right.
business owners, right? Like that's my biggest issue. Like,
Well, that's the thing I was going to say.
raising
There's
the
a
minimum wage
difference.
would harm small business in some way, people say, but I think that proposing a way that, just like when the banks started failing, we bailed them out. Why don't we propose raising minimum wage so everyone can get a living wage? And if a
Yeah.
small business owner who is a tax-paying, God-loving American that built their business up by their bootstraps, but doesn't have the resources of a McDonald's or a Walmart or an Amazon, well, those are the people that the U.S. government should be helping.
Right.
Small government, small business, small people. It used to be the type of things that Republicans and all these Democrat, Republican, both sides have it wrong at this point. Nobody knows what they're doing anymore. And it's like, can we just have enough food?
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, I agree with you 100% that it's true. Like, we should be worried. And there's a difference between the small businesses and the big businesses. Obviously, the bigger businesses, the chain restaurants, don't need as much help, obviously, because they have, we're talking about Dodden. Now, I'm not saying you specifically, but I'm thinking about Dodden because I'm in the Orlando area. I mean, they have tons and tons and tons of money. Where a regular small business, they don't have that kind of money. So there's a big difference between small business and those big businesses, such as those.
Yeah, like even Disney. I don't want to anger the mouse, but even Disney has
Correct.
plenty of reports of their workers not being treated the best, or
That's
for all
true.
of their Pride Days and inclusiveness, they have plenty of non-inclusive things they do as well. Like, it's
Yeah.
we've got to do the good PR thing over here, but over here we're really an asshole, right? And all the big corps do it. At least the small businesses, they have their hearts in the right place. They just really can't afford to do much more because they are also impoverished like I am and the working class is, but in a different way. It's
I've worked at Disney many times, so I'll say that. And yes, I agree with you what you said, and we'll just leave it at that, just in case I ever do have any dealings with them again.
Yeah,
But
I hope I didn't just ruin my chances at Guardians 4. Damn it.
We'll leave it at that. I want to end with the podcast. So you do have a podcast. We teased it at the beginning of the broadcast. Mohawk Joey. Definitely look it up on YouTube, and please subscribe to Joey's podcast on YouTube also.
And if you look it up on any podcast, anywhere you listen to podcasts, the name of the podcast is The Pragmatic Anarchist. So you can find it by artist Mohawk Joey, or title of the podcast, The Pragmatic Anarchist.
But for people that are listening, definitely go to YouTube, Mohawk Joey. And again, on Spotify, Amazon, they can get the podcast also.
The Pragmatic Anarchist on any platform you listen to podcasts.
Okay. All right. Well,
and then that can all be found at my website too, www.mohawkjoey.com.
Okay, mohawkjoey.com. Yeah, definitely check that out also. So, Joey, first of all, thanks so much for coming on. I'm looking forward to doing our second podcast with each other, and keep up the good work, man. Fight the fight. And he's not a bot, and he's kicking ass. So appreciate you for doing what you're doing.
I'm a real person. Beep, boop,
boop. All right, Joey. We'll have you on again. I appreciate you.
All right, man. Good. Thanks for coming on.